Hello, Dan. Hello, John. I'm Karen Pereira from Times of India. So nice to meet you.
Great to meet you.
How have you been, both of you?
Very well. I like to say, is that your dog barking there?
No, it's downstairs. So sorry for the interruption.
That's like the beginning of a modern love story about you and your neighbor with the dog.
Yeah, true. Modern Love Story explores love, loss, and everything in between. Daniel, you have been the editor of this series for almost 2 decades now. Tell us, where do you think love goes when it's lost?
Wow, that's a hard question. Where does love go when it's lost? I think what I have learned from the column in terms of people's bravery or lack of bravery is how lost love, how people can rebound from lost love and open themselves to love again, whether that love is, that lost love is from someone dying, or from a divorce, or just separated by distance. It's always remarkable to me how people get back into the game again, and knowing how painful, knowing the pain they're exposing themselves to again. So I'd say that it's sometimes, depending on who you are, it's lost, and you can't get back into it again, and then it's just not recycled or not refound again. But for people who are brave and who are actually living a life, it's found again in someone else.
Through these stories that you bring to the screen, how do you think love has evolved over the last few years, and in the way romantic stories have been portrayed on screen?
Do you mean like in the last few years since the pandemic, or do you mean sort of?
You guys beautifully incorporated the pandemic into season 2. So how do you think, through the last decade or so, through all the different stories that have come your way, how do you think it has evolved on screen and off?
Well, in terms of the column, I think Dan might be better equipped to answer that question, just in terms of that you read and absorb so much more of that. And I've only been on the project more recently. Do you want to talk about the last few decades?
Yeah, or even I'm almost more interested in how it's changed during the pandemic, because we're so close to this pandemic still that it's hard to step back and see. But I loved, in retrospect, thinking about the pandemic in phases, and how, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, and we didn't know what it was going to mean, and how long it was going to last, and how devastating it was going to be. There was this moment of people who were in casual relationships, and people had to sort of go into quarantine, and were they going to go into that by themselves, or were they going to throw in with someone who they didn't know all that well, or who they were just seeing casually? And what a moment that was. And I think these kinds of changes, there are changes like that have happened over the past couple of decades, where what's happening in the world affects how serious we are romantically, or what opportunities there are. And I think the pandemic, for a lot of long-term relationships, has been a pressure cooker, and has broken up a lot of relationships. I think for people who were able to find love during the pandemic, it's been a real adhesive sort of. It has brought people together and made relationships deeper that maybe wouldn't have had that opportunity otherwise.
So speaking of on-screen romance and love, John, can you tell us some of the first romantic movies that you watched that you still remember, and maybe even set the course for your own love story?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I suppose the really romantic films that I was big into, like, I wasn't a rom-com person, really, strictly speaking. I wanted to find myself in a complex relationship in France in the 1960s with Jean Moreau driving around in a, a sports car, but at the same time, or even Ingmar Bergman, who would not be held up as a particularly romantic guy. I was like into complex love affairs, and I think I missed the sort of rom-com era of American cinema a little bit. And I would have said that I felt like early, like George Cukor movies, 30s and 40s sort of screwball romances, I really liked when the genre was being sort of invented for the first time. And you could get, like there's so many great films in that period that would like have a couple divorce, like Cary Grant, and I can think of countless examples of romantic movies that was like, okay, break the couple up in the first act and then realize that they can't be apart for the next two acts and have them remarry at the end. Like, what a great romantic message that is. And it's so fun, and it's sort of so, and again, New York was often the sort of backdrop for those movies, the sort of the metropolis and the fast moving life of people trying to get on with their lives and their careers, but like, you know what I mean? Like baking their romance into that. And I was very drawn. I think I've always been drawn to the idea of romance and love through your work, and finding a person who works with you, but also you kind of have a romance. Do you know what I mean? It's a very, the two things were always sort of very intertwined with me, which and I can name so many movies in which, people fall in love in the office, or through their work, or chasing a story, or so that's what I'm personally drawn to.
In Modern Love, season 1 and 2, you had a number of great actors. You had even Anne Hathaway, Dave Patel, Kit Harrington, Tina Fey. Who was the most easiest to get on board this show? And how do you decide which one to put for which story?
You kind of, well, I don't like to, when I'm writing something, I don't like to pick an actor in mind, because often you'll be really disappointed then, and it'll feel like you only got second best. So I go into the casting thing quite open, and with 10 names or 5 or 10 names. Occasionally there were the Anne Hathaway is the case in point. I had written back and forth. We had been writing to each other a little bit after I made a film about finding something to do. And this was a perfect example. The Lexi story was so I was able to say, hey, look, we're making this show and they're half-hour episodes, and would you read this? And she read it, and she was in right from the beginning. There was no other person that could have played that role in my mind. But generally, this is such a great show because you can ring up people and say, look, it's a half-an-hour commitment. You get to play this character who's, falling in love or out of love or in grief or sadness, or do you want to do this for 5 days or 6 days of your life? It's a very easy, nice thing for an actor to get on board, and the commitment is short. And so generally, that's been the way it's gone. We haven't been refused or turned down by many people, and it's lovely because it's often the way that you like. With feature films, it's very different because you can go to 10 or 15 actors and they're busy, and it's like a huge amount of commitment and they can't do it. But with this, it's like generally we've gotten the people that we've aimed for. They've been pretty responsive, which is a thing that I hope lasts.
So my personal favorite from this season, from season 2, is Kit Harrington's episode, where you're left with this cliffhanger and you don't know if he finally meets the girl on the train. Have you ever considered maybe just telling us what happens? Does he meet the girl, or?
You know, the only reason
film.
Yeah, the only reason that that's an open ending, and this is the only reason I did not do that out of being a smart ass filmmaker and like, oh, I'll leave them. It was purely that the piece that it was based on was open ended. And you didn't find out because it was a pandemic story and it was one of the tiny love stories. It was really just a couple of sentences long. I met a person on a train. We totally connected. We never thought that the pandemic would blow up. We got off. The pandemic started. We both realized, I don't have a number for this person. That to me was like a very delicious pretext for an episode, but I didn't want to bolt on a happy ending. And because that would, even though it was frustrating for lots of us, unlike yourself, which I'm really happy that you liked, a lot of people found it frustrating, that episode, because it was like, hang on, you can't bring us here and tell us you're going to make a piece of TV and then leave us on a rooftop in Dublin without knowing whether they make it together. There was a lot of frustration with that, but I think it was the right thing to do for the show, because they have to stick. We can't contradict the message of the column and the show, which is that like sometimes things don't work out and you don't know how they end. And if we take an episode that has that, we decided as a team, let's not mess with that too much. Otherwise it's like Hollywood.
But my take on that ending was that they did find each other, because that was the beginning of a long lockdown. I don't think it was that long of a street, and he was camped out, and he had his provisions, and he's going to find her.
100%, that's 100% my worldview. Don't get me wrong. I'm a romantic. I would be sitting there in that car if I was that guy waiting for that person, and I would make sure to find them. But I just didn't want to. I didn't want to tell them that that's the way it had to work out.
Right.
In fact, I think there was one stage that I had written a song that actually described what happened, and that was the song that would play out in the credits. Did I ever play that to you, Dan?
No.
It was like kind of like suddenly the song would begin, and it would be like, you know, it would go like,
here we go.
So he never did meet that girl. He got COVID, and she passed him by and the song would actually catch up with itself now, but there was like a really miserable ending in which the singer would say they never met again.
Oh, that's really funny.
Yeah, it was a bit dark though.
So Dan, you were telling me about how you think love is portrayed differently across different parts of the world, and how can you tell us what was your favorite thing about Modern Love Mumbai?
What I'm so impressed by, and what makes me optimistic about this series appearing in other countries, is how the filmmaker sees on these universal situations. It doesn't matter, you know, if you live in Brooklyn, your husband can leave you. If you live in Mumbai, your husband can leave you, and you'll need to find a new way to get to work, and it will reflect all of the other cultural differences there are in how you tell that story. But that germ of the story and that heartbreak and that sort of feminist empowerment in that case of finding your way back, that was one of my favorite stories in the Mumbai, was the first one, Rat Rani, where she gets across that bridge on her own by the end and is not going to follow the rules anymore and not going to be told no anymore. I thought that was brilliant, and same with having food be an act of love from a parent to a child, and if your child is going to marry somebody else, how food is going to become a power struggle there. That's maybe heightened in India, but not unique to India. And I think those kinds of moments and power struggles and opportunities that the filmmaker seized on really made me so happy just about how we're all really just people living in different places, but with having the same impulses and the same struggles, and the show around the world. I think that's what is going to come from it, is that sense of universality.
Okay. And at a time when the internet is flooded with, so much erotica and all these genres pushing love to different darker sides. Do you think this Modern Love will eventually explore that, or do you want to give hope through your show?
Wow. I guess is what you're saying. If what you're saying is, I'm not sure what you're saying, but I think you're saying that like the with the internet and with lockdowns and with COVID and people living increasingly internet lives, and there was definitely a thing coming from us when we were making the show about the idea. I'm not sure if we got this quite right or not, but it was a valiant effort to make a show that would be maybe useful to people in a sense. That wasn't just about entertaining you or like keeping you watching or clicking, or there were no plots. It was more about the idea that I've often found when I'm going through extreme situations in life, certain pieces of art or culture really speaking to me and really genuinely helping me, even more than like an individual might. And I thought, you see, I grew up in Ireland where we had the BBC, and the BBC's original kind of brief was to be of a service. It was the British Broadcasting Corporation. It was a service. It was a public service. And you would get plays, and you would get news, and you would get facts, and you would get help. And young people would get shows that would help them with things. And it was a really brilliant concept, that TV wasn't about entertainment as much as about a service like gas or like electricity or water or TV. You know, it was like amazing idea. And it's unfortunately being slightly eroded at the moment by a few people, but it got into my bloodstream as a young person watching TV that it could be a little bit like, you know, the American equivalent, I think, in that is like PBS, right? Or like Sesame Street or something, that you could get a public service through TV. And I really do believe in that. And I think it's something that we're losing sight of with all of the streamers and all of the, you know, content and stuff that's coming out. We don't know what to watch. And I think it would be kind of cool to make a show that had actually, you could, you know, episode 8, season 3 of Modern Love. That's if you've lost somebody, watch that show, it'll help you. Season 2, because they're based on real life stories, specifically now, because they're based on that. You could have a TV show that would be kind of useful to people in different stages or at places in their life. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing to be part of? And I really do, to your point, I think, believe that we can make TV and films and content useful, not just entertaining or placating, but actually of use to people.
And the use of storytelling as a teacher rather than, I mean, there's explicit service like how-to articles and all of that, but this is storytelling as a teacher and as a service, which is the oldest form there is. I mean, we used to write on cave walls like, don't go there, there's a lion there. You know, it's like, but storytelling as a teacher and as you know, I think that like the Anne Hathaway episode helped an enormous amount of people. I can't tell you how much social media I followed that said, this changed my life. This episode made me recognize something in a friend or in myself that changed my life.
That's
so mission
great.
accomplished. Mission accomplished.
Well, one out of what, 18?
No, more than that.
That's okay.
John, you just mentioned season 3. Can you confirm when we're getting that?
No, you have to wait. We're waiting. We're going to see what Amazon are doing, and we'll figure it out. We feel like there's a limitless cache of, you know, essays that Dan has curated and worked on, and over the years, it's a big basket of toys to go to. So, and we feel like we're here to make the show whenever we can all, the stars align, and we're all, you know, I don't think it's anything that needs to be like a plot-based thriller that has to go each year. We could come back in a couple of years and make a season, or, you know, go and make a season in different countries or different approaches to making it. So we don't have a plan for that at the moment, but we're very invested in the show.
So besides, these stories that bring hope and, a sense of realness, like over the last few months, we have seen heard stories of people marrying their pets, their robots. And today in India, somebody married herself. A girl married herself. Do you think such kind of stories will happen? Or do you think such a story is better for something like a Black Mirror?
Well, yeah, we could do, a series of Modern Love / Black Mirror where it's like, do you know what I mean? It's like the weirder and more sort of experimental side of how technology affects love, which is what Black Mirror is about really in many ways, is technology. And it's certainly going to be interesting to watch whether people actually, it's funny because I'm actually just about to start making a movie which is kind of about a relationship online, and there's a kind of a will they, won't they feel to it, and because I think a lot of people are doing that. And I'm not sure, I'm on the fence a little bit as to whether you can really have much of a deep relationship with the screen. I did with Lauren Bacall for a long time, but she didn't know anything about it. But I don't know if people are going to get tired of all of this wonderful technology and go, you know what, I need hands and necks and eyes and ears and all of that, and that you can't really truly have this polarization and global reach that we claim that we're having all of these relationships and friendships and Zoom calls and conference calls. I'm a bit of a skeptic about all of that, frankly. But I would marry myself. I can see why it would work.
I can see the appeal of that, right?
Yeah. Do the dishes. No. Okay.
One of my founding philosophies of Modern Love was that it had to be about people and about two people. The idea of a pet or a robot or yourself, like the complexity comes from someone who's in a position to not give you what you want, or to give you what you want, but it has to be some sort of negotiation, and there has to be an equal opposing force. So we've had plenty of people trying to submit stories about their love of a book or a movie or a city or a robot or whatever, but it has to be an equal and opposing force to really produce conflict and drama and all of that.
Any message for all your fans watching in India and the world?
All you need is love.
Okay. Thank you very much. It was so lovely talking to you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And can't wait for more content.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.